let's jump into the coaching carousel. We have to start by calling Baton Rouge, right? We have to start with the biggest, most publicized, most chaotic, most drama-filled, most Marty Smith-filled hire, and that was Lane Kiffin spurning the extension offers from Ole Miss to go over to longtime rival of the Rebels, LSU. We don't have to get all the way into the drama, Garrett, because I think everybody knows by this point how this kind of played out. It was insane. It was like a male soap opera on steroids. But just zooming out from that and taking the drama aside, how do you grade this move for LSU? It was the biggest splash, but is it the best possible hire for the Bayou Bengals?
If you're grading this move, I think this is one of, if not the only, like true A+ hires of the offseason. And I say that not just because of what they needed to do, right? After they got, kind of embarrassed by Texas A&M, they fire, Brian Kelly, and they got out of the situation middle of the season, right? That can't happen. You're done. They needed to find somebody. I think they knew who they wanted from the start. I think they kind of saw the writing on the wall with Lane Kiffin and not being super happy at Ole Miss. They made a move and they went for it. And I got to respect it because honestly, if you whiff on that, you could be in a much worse situation because, for as much as we give Brian Kelly crap, he's not that bad of a coach. Like he really isn't that bad. He'll keep your program in a somewhat stable position. It just turns out for LSU, stable isn't what they want. They want to shoot for the stars. And rightfully so, right? They've had, several coaches now win national championships. Brian Kelly's the first guy in like 4 hires that couldn't pull it off. And so, for me, when I'm looking at this hire, I think this was a slam dunk for what Lane was able to establish at Ole Miss, for what he was able to kind of build up his program as. I think this is a huge thing for them. I'm really excited for LSU to see where this goes. And you'll know, too, like for those who listen to the podcast and who have listened to us for any extended amount of time, we're not necessarily the biggest like Lane Kiffin as a person fans on this pod. We don't necessarily love the way that he's maybe trashed players or dealt with the fake injury thing or whatever else he does. But at the end of the day, I cannot disrespect who he is as a head coach, his ability to, put together an offense, his ability to put together a team through the portal and win through the portal. You combine that with a team like LSU, right? Just kind of the culture that's there, everything that they have going on. I think this is a really, really good hire for the LSU Tigers.
Well, I want to point people back to our first 2 episodes that we ever did on this podcast because I don't know if you remember this, Garrett. Do you remember what the topics were on those 2 episodes?
It was good coach, bad coach.
Good coach, bad coach, essentially, yeah. So we talked about, I think that was leading up to the 22 season. We kind of did a similar coaching carousel episode, top 5 hires, and we did 5 questionable hires. And we said, hey, Brian Kelly at LSU, not sold. Not sold on the cultural fit. Yep. Obviously has won a lot of games in his time as a head coach at Cincinnati and Notre Dame. I don't know why that was blanking from my memory, but obviously
you're thinking through the conferences and you couldn't find them.
Exactly. But it was a time where he had won a ton of games. It was a huge splash hire, obviously. But we looked at the cultural fit and we were like, don't see it. Already faking accents at basketball games when you're getting introduced, has a short fuse and is going to have to manage that donor base. We straight up said we didn't think that Brian Kelly was going to succeed at LSU. And yes, he did win the SEC West one time. He did have some bright moments, got a Heisman Trophy quarterback. But overall, obviously getting fired in the middle of year 4, not successful. I think that's fair to say. So with that being said, as the backdrop, is Lane Kiffin going to be a successful coach at Ole Miss? Is he going to fit into that culture and be able to manage all the craziness around that program?
I actually think that this is a good culture fit. Number one, just because, obviously Lane has connections through the South, right? Like he's been doing it at Ole Miss. He was doing it with, Tennessee. He was at Bama for a while. Like he's got connections through the South. He's been here. He understands what it's like down in the SEC. So I think for one thing, that's it. But I think everyone also kind of understands that LSU is a different type of thing. And one of the comparisons I've been saying, and I hope that LSU fans don't take this the wrong way, so hear me out for a second. I think it makes sense because they're both kind of the bad guy. And I don't mean it in terms of like LSU are just the villains or they're evil or something like that. But like LSU's always kind of had that mean streak to them. You know, their fans get a little bit crazy at the games, and you don't just walk into, I mean, come on, you call it Death Valley, right? Like this is there's a certain mean streak to it. And I think I say that in an endearing way, right? This is definitely a good thing for y'all. It's an intimidating place to play. And when you see the purple and the gold across from you, it definitely intimidates people. And so you combine kind of what LSU has been, sort of just kind of that, you know, nasty attitude, with a guy in Lane Kiffin who he's not afraid to do what it takes either to win. And he's definitely pissing people off with who he is. And he's definitely willing to go out there and just kind of be himself. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but that's fine. I think it kind of fits because I think they both kind of have the same mindset of like, I'm going to win. I'm going to go poke you in your eye if I have to win. Like, I don't care what I got to do. I'm going to make it work. I think it's a great fit. Now, like, is the hot yoga scene in Baton Rouge incredibly good? Hand over my heart, I don't know. Like,
We're gonna have to get
haven't
some
been
boots
to,
on the ground to
yeah,
figure that
I've
out.
been to Baton Rouge a couple of times, have not done hot yoga in Baton Rouge. I'm trying to rack my brain and think, like, when I was going to Chimes, like, was there a place across the street that also had like hot yoga? I don't know. Maybe it's a thing. But it's I don't know. But I don't think that, like, from just like a who he is, like, he doesn't strike me as like very Louisiana, but I think that the mindset is there, and I think that they're both kind of in a similar way, just very willing to do anything it takes to win, put together an absolute juggernaut of a Death Star of a team, right? Just to make sure that this thing is going to find its way to another championship. I think it's honestly a great culture fit.
I think Lane is a guy that can mold himself to be the fit that he needs to be in a specific situation, right? Like he was great for Ole Miss. He was very endearing to that fan base until he wasn't. He was great at other stops, right? When he is the guy and when you give him control, I think that he has every ability to kind of mold himself in a way that Brian Kelly was kind of trying to, but just didn't have the authenticity to back
Yeah.
it up. And now listen, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that I think Lane is an authentic person, but I think Lane has the personality skills that Brian Kelly just
He's
absolutely did
extremely
not.
charismatic, whereas, yeah,
Exactly.
Brian Kelly's kind of a potato.
Brian Kelly just kind of comes across as an angry little man
Yeah.
that is frustrated that he's not getting his way or somebody else has an opinion. And Lane Kiffin, I think, does a better job of managing that when there's conflict and figuring out how to get the ducks in a row around the program. So all the on the field stuff, I think, is going to be great. I think you're going to see a fantastic offense. I think you're going to see, a lack of boneheaded coaching decisions that maybe started to become characteristic of late stage Brian Kelly. I don't think that there's necessarily going to be holes in the roster as Lane Kiffin utilizes the portal really well and has a very advanced scouting mechanism for the transfer portal. I also think, with that talent acquisition, I think it's going to be fine. LSU is
Yeah.
never going to be hurting for talent. What I will say, my one concern for LSU fans, though, is if he was going to leave and cheat on pretty much every job that's he's ever had. He's always been looking for the next job. What makes you think you're going to be any different? And I know the answer to that from LSU fans is that we're LSU, baby. Like we can win with almost anybody. They had the stat with every coach winning a national championship until they didn't with Brian Kelly. But hey, we are a prime big time program. And to that, I will say that's fantastic. What happens when Ohio State calls?
Right.
What happens when an NFL job calls? What happens when he just gets bored and wants to go to Twitter and tweet cryptic things? And then you have a twinge of your fan base that will not handle that well. So
Yeah.
I think that Lane having some very toxic personality traits mixed with a fan base that is not known for being the most stable. Garrett, I don't think that any LSU fan could try to convince me otherwise. It's not a matter of if, but when there are some fireworks here. And now that could mean that they still win national championships, plural. But there will be fireworks, and it will be very, very entertaining for rival fan bases at
Right.
some point.
And on that note of like maybe leaving, because the saying is, if she'll cheat with you, she'll cheat on you, right? So
Absolutely.
look, it's kind of, if I'm looking anywhere, I'm maybe looking at Tuscaloosa and saying, hey, that's a place where he's been. I know that obviously not a coaching hire to be made there quite yet, but people aren't exactly happy over there. And if it's a couple seasons later and he still isn't doing anything in the playoffs over there as DeBoer, that could be the job that, comes calling. And as much as LSU would want to say, like, hey, like, we're LSU, it's like, well, I mean, I get it, but like Bama's still Bama until they're not. Like the rest of the college football world can sit here and say, and I'll make the case of it too, that Bama's not quite as dominant as they were, but Bama's still Bama until they're not. So like the Bama title, the Bama name, all that stuff, like that's still a thing. And that's not to disparage anything about LSU. Like I think LSU is an incredible program. I think they've done incredible things, and coach after coach, like you were saying, they win. That might just be a little bit crazy. The one thing I will say about kind of the emotions and the fireworks and all of that, it could be a disaster, right? Like I think we all acknowledge like this could get really bad where like he's yelling at the media's yelling at him. You got radio shows, saying all sorts of stuff about him, and then he's like shooting stuff off on Twitter and pictures and everything else. It could also be like that one couple. I feel like everyone kind of knows that couple where like they're both kind of toxic, but they just kind of work together. And so it's like, well, there's no real reason why this couple should work. And like probably behind closed doors, they yell and say like unnecessary things to each other, but like it just ends up working out and they're happy. And it's just like this insanely cool relationship. That could also be what's happening here. It could be, to steal the line from High School Musical, it could be the start of something new, right?
Well, let's call our shots here. Do you think Lane will win a national championship at LSU?
Yeah, I do. I think he's going to win a championship at LSU. In fact, the only way that I think this is incorrect is if the answer is no, he does not win a championship. He wins multiple championships. I think Lane Kiffin has his situation with Ole Miss might be a true, like both teams had it, for the better by the end of it. But I think with more resources, with the portal ability that he has, with the natural talent that just is in that state, all those Louisianimals and their ability to just kind of get it done in state, combine that with portal, getting anybody that he probably wants after the first couple of years, getting to prove this program. Yeah, I think, we've seen Alabama fall off a little bit. We've seen, maybe, Texas, Georgia, some of those teams not quite live up to standards. A&M and Oklahoma, they both made the playoff this year. Ole Miss made the playoff this year. So like you got programs that are up there at the top right now. I think Lane Kiffin can boost LSU above all of them and win at least a championship, if not more.
At the risk of being a hot take artist, I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Because, and I'm not saying that he won't have a championship caliber team. I think more often than not he will. But his best team at Ole Miss, he left them right in the middle of a championship run. So
it's a great point.
I mean, who's to say there's not going to be somebody offering him just an insane contract for $18 million a year or something like that.
Dips on his team in the national championship game, just like, oh, they just called, they want me. So
until we get the calendar fixed, until we figure this out, like that's still going to be hanging over the head, and he's going to leverage that every single time. So
one question that might be worth it is he going to stay at LSU long enough to survive Cignetti's retirement from Indiana? Because I don't know if Indiana's ever losing another football game for the next decade until he retires. So maybe that's the real question: is just can anybody win a championship as long as Indiana's doing their thing?
It's a fair question. It's a fair question based on what we saw in the field, but I'm going to say no. I'm going to take the contrarian take. We were right about Brian Kelly. We're split here on Lane Kiffin. I've always said with Lane, I got to see that he can win the big one before I believe it. And I just think I think all the on-field stuff is there, man, but I just think there's too much drama that will ultimately get in the way. Let us know what you think. Let us know in the comments. Will Lane Kiffin be successful at LSU? Will he win a national championship at LSU? Let us know in the comments on Spotify, on YouTube, wherever you are finding this content.